The desert wind carried voices only she could hear. Little Maeve sat on the back porch of a crumbling shack, her bare feet black with dirt, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun bled into the land. She was only 7 when her mother vanished, leaving nothing but a torn ribbon caught in the fence wire. Her father drank himself hollow, and the house filled with silence that clawed at her chest. Nights were the worst. Coyotes howled, floorboards groaned, and Maeve learned to fear sleep itself. By 16, she had drifted into Hollow Creek, a town built on whiskey and whispered sins. The saloon became her refuge, though refuge was too kind a word. The men came for cheap drink and cheaper comfort. She gave them smiles that weren't hers, laughter that never reached her eyes. Every night, when the piano quieted and the lamps burned low, she sat in the corner and trembled at shadows that curled like fingers across the floorboards. One night, the door creaked open and dust blew in with a tall stranger. His boots spoke first, heavy against the wood. Maeve lifted her gaze and found eyes that didn't leer, didn't take, but seemed to measure the weight of her sorrow. His name was Eli, a drifter, lean and scarred, with a voice made of gravel and smoke. He asked for water, not whiskey, and in that moment, Maeve felt something she hadn't in years seen. But Hollow Creek was a place where being seen could kill you. Men noticed the way Eli watched her, the way she softened in his presence. Whispers turned to threats. A knife was left on her bed one night, blade glinting in the moonlight, a silent warning. She told Eli she was afraid to sleep alone, that the darkness carried her mother's voice and the menace of men who wanted her silence. His reply was quiet, but firm as iron. Your fears in tonight. The promise hung in the air, fragile, dangerous. For promises in Hollow Creek were debts paid in blood. The next morning, Maeve woke to find a black feather on her windowsill, though no bird had roost there. She clutched it in shaking hands, unsure if it was omen or salvation. And when she stepped into the saloon, Eli was gone. But the fear was not. The saloon doors swung open with a crack like thunder. Maeve flinched, her tray slipping in her hands as every eye turned toward the man entering. He wasn't Eli. This stranger carried the desert in his stare, cold, unyielding, merciless. His coat was long and black, the edges frayed from years of riding. His revolver gleamed, polished and ready. He stood there, silent, his gaze sweeping the room until it settled on Maeve. Her breath caught. She didn't know his name, but the way he looked at her made her blood turn to ice. It wasn't lust or hunger. It was recognition, as if he already knew her story, every dark corner of it. The piano faltered, then stopped. Men shifted uneasily, muttering. The bartender cleared his throat and asked the stranger if he wanted a drink. The man didn't answer. He walked straight past, boots heavy, spurs clinking like a slow death march. He stopped inches from Maeve. "Where's the drifter?" His voice was low, cold enough to chill the whiskey on the bar. Maeve's heart hammered. He meant Eli. She tried to mask the panic in her voice, told him she didn't know. But the stranger leaned closer, close enough she could smell the dust and gunpowder clinging to him. "Don't lie, girl. He promised you safety. That makes you dangerous." Before she could respond, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist like iron. Pain flared. She gasped, but then another hand caught the stranger's arm. Eli had returned, his jaw clenched, eyes burning. For a moment, the saloon stood frozen, the weight of violence pressing down like a storm about to break. The stranger smiled, though it wasn't a smile at all. So, the hero shows his face. The room emptied in heartbeats, men stumbling over chairs to get clear. Maeve's breath trembled as Eli pushed her behind him. The two men stared at each other, the silence between them louder than gunfire. Maeve knew then this wasn't a chance. The stranger hadn't wandered into Hollow Creek by accident. He had come for Eli, and whatever passed lay between them was soaked in blood. That night, Maeve didn't close her eyes once. She sat by the window with Eli's words echoing in her head, "Your fears in tonight." But now she feared more than shadows. She feared the man with the cold eyes, and the secret he carried that might swallow them both whole. The storm broke 2 nights later. It wasn't thunder but gunfire. Maeve jolted awake in her small upstairs room, heart slamming against her ribs. Shouts rose from the street below. She pulled the curtain back just enough to see figures moving in the moonlight, rifles flashing. The stranger had brought men with him, wolves circling. Downstairs, the saloon doors creaked, then slammed. Maeve froze, listening. Heavy boots on the floorboards, the scrape of chairs pushed aside. She could almost hear them breathing. Then a voice, low, steady, carrying up the staircase like a knife, bring her down. Maeve's blood turned cold. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her mouth to silence her breath. She thought of running, thought of leaping from the window into the alley. But shadows shifted below, blocking every path. Her knees buckled. She felt the old terror crawl up her spine, the same fear that haunted her since childhood nights alone. And then, Eli's voice. Calm, measured, though it cut through the chaos like steel. She's not yours. The saloon erupted. Gunfire cracked, wood splintered, men shouted. Maeve stumbled back, clutching the bedpost. The air filled with smoke, acrid and suffocating. She dropped to her knees, crawling across the floorboards as screams tore through the night. When the shooting stopped, silence pressed down heavy as a coffin lid. Maeve dared to peek down the staircase. The saloon was littered with bodies, tables overturned, glass shattered. Eli stood in the center, his shirt dark with blood, not all of it his own. His chest heaved, his revolver still warm in his hand. But the stranger wasn't among the dead. Maeve felt it, even before Eli looked at her with eyes heavy as grave dirt. He's still out there, Eli whispered, and he won't stop. Maeve's fear shifted in that moment. No longer just of shadows or the lonely dark. Now she feared the truth. Whoever the stranger was, he carried a claim, not just on Eli's life, but on hers. The night swallowed Hollow Creek, but the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The desert was quiet that night, too quiet. Maeve sat near the back of the saloon, hands trembling as she tried to clean the blood from the floorboards. The bodies had been dragged away, but the smell lingered. Iron, smoke, and death. Every creak of the building made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hold the stranger's cold eyes. Ili hadn't slept. He stood by the window, revolver in hand, scanning the street. His silence weighed heavy, like he was carrying a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Maeve wanted to ask who the man was, why he hunted them, but fear kept her lips shut. At midnight, the quiet shattered. A single gunshot cracked through the night. Eli cursed under his breath and bolted out the door, Maeve chasing behind despite her fear. The street was empty, the dust unsettled. A horse neighed in the distance, then silence again. Eli moved fast, checking alleys, his body tense as a drawn bow. Maeve followed, her heart hammering, until they reached the old stable on the edge of town. The door stood open, swinging slowly, hinges whining like a dying man. Inside, lantern light flickered, and there, tied to a post, was Jonas, the sheriff. His face bruised, blood running down his temple. His eyes widened at the sight of Eli and Maeve. "Run," he rasped. "It's a trap." The moment cracked open like thunder. Gunfire erupted from the loft above, bullets tearing through the wooden beams. Eli shoved Maeve behind a barrel as splinters rained down. Shadows moved above, rifles flashing. Men loyal to the stranger. Betrayal. Maeve's stomach sank as she saw the sheriff's badge lying in the dirt, burned, defiled. Jonas owed him, Eli growled, reloading with steady hands. The stranger owns debts, and men like Jonas pay with betrayal. Maeve couldn't breathe. Everything she thought stable, the sheriff, the law, even Hollow Creek itself, crumbled in that instant. Trust was smoke. Safety was an illusion. When the shooting slowed, Eli pulled her close, whispering through clenched teeth. "This isn't about the town anymore. It's about me. About what I did." Maeve stared at him, fear and fury tangling in her chest. Whatever Eli's past held, it was dragging them both toward ruin. And for the first time, she wondered if his promise, that her fears would end tonight, was the greatest lie of all. The night still held more bullets, and more truth, waiting to cut deeper than any blade. The stable reeked of gunpowder and fear. Smoke curled through the rafters, stinging Maeve's eyes as she pressed against Eli's arm. His revolver clicked empty. Only silence answered back. The men above had gone still, waiting like wolves in the dark. Eli's voice was low, strained. "We can't stay. When I move, you run." Maeve shook her head, tears streaking the dust on her cheeks. "You promised," she whispered. "You said my fears would end tonight." Eli met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw the weight in his eyes, guilt buried deep, dragging at him heavier than chains. He cupped her cheek, rough palm trembling. "Then I'll keep it, even if it kills me." The loft groaned. Boots shifted above. Eli moved like lightning, shoving Maeve toward the open door as shots thundered. He spun, firing blind, with shattering around him. Maeve stumbled into the night, falling hard onto the dirt. Behind her, men screamed. One body crashed from the loft, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. And then came silence again. Eli staggered out of the stable, blood dripping from a fresh wound in his side. His shirt clung wet against him, breath ragged. Maeve rushed to him, pressing her hands to the wound, but he caught her wrist. His voice was hoarse, urgent. "This stranger. His name is Calder. Years ago, I left him bleeding in the desert. Thought the vultures would finish the job, but he crawled out. Now he's come to finish me." The truth struck harder than any bullet. Maeve's heart twisted. Eli wasn't the savior she imagined. He was the cause, the spark that lit this storm. Eli's knees buckled, but he held her hand, forcing her to listen. "Maeve, I can't undo what I've done. But I swear, by my blood, he won't touch you. Not while I'm breathing." A shadow moved at the edge of the street. Calder. His long coat trailed in the dust, eyes glinting like steel in the lantern glow. He didn't rush. He walked steady, every step deliberate, as if savoring the inevitability of the end. Maeve tightened her grip on Eli's hand. She had begged for safety all her life. But now she understood safety was a lie in this land. Only choices remained, and hers stood clear as the moon above: stand with Eli or run into the night alone. The air hung thick, heavy with the scent of blood and the weight of promises carved in gunfire. And somewhere in that silence, Maeve's fear cracked. Not gone, but changed. What came next would not be about survival alone. It would be about loyalty, about love, about the cost of a promise made in blood. Dawn bled across the horizon, painting the desert in fire and ash. Maeve rode beside Eli, his body swaying weakly in the saddle, every breath a battle. Behind them, Hollow Creek shrank into dust. Ahead lay nothing but endless road and the promise of death stalking their heels. Elias von Misterith. His shirt clung dark to his ribs, every bump in the trail ringing a groan from him. Maeve pressed her hand to his back, steadying him. "We should stop," she begged. But Eli's reply was a rasp, iron even in weakness. "If we stop, Calder finds us. Keep riding." The road stretched empty, yet Maeve felt eyes everywhere. On the ridges and the gulches, behind the rocks where shadows shifted with the rising sun. And then she saw them. 3 riders cresting the hill, rifles gleaming, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Calder's men. Her pulse spiked. The riders spurred hard, hooves pounding, dust exploding behind them. Eli straightened, teeth gritted, pulling his revolver with shaking hands. Maeve grabbed the reins, urging the horse faster, the desert wind tearing at her hair. Gunfire cracked. Bullets hissed past, splintering stone. One tore through Maeve's sleeve, burning her skin. She cried out, but didn't stop, didn't dare. Eli twisted in the saddle, firing back, every shot echoing like thunder. One rider fell, his body tumbling lifeless into the dust. But 2 more closed in, relentless. Maeve's heart thundered. Fear screamed inside her, but something deeper rose with it, a defiance she had never known. She yanked Eli's second revolver from his belt, hands trembling, and turned in the saddle. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed her shoulder, but the shot flew true. A rider toppled backward, his rifle spinning away. Only one remained. He rode harder, face grim beneath the brim of his hat. Eli raised his revolver, but the chamber clicked empty. Maeve's hand shook as she tried to steady the gun again. The rider lifted his rifle, aiming not at Eli, but at her. Time slowed. Dust swirled. Maeve pulled the trigger. She gasped. The rider's rifle barked fire, but the shot never struck. Eli had hurled himself in front of her, the bullet tearing through his shoulder. He roared in pain, collapsing against her as the rider thundered past, circling for another shot. Maeve screamed, rage flooding her veins. She grabbed the reins, spurring the horse into the canyon, the rider's shadow chasing close behind. Eli's blood soaked her dress, his voice a ragged whisper against her ear. "Don't stop. Don't let him win." The canyon walls closed in, the echoes of hooves and gunfire ringing like a death knell. Maeve knew the end was near, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't running from fear. She was running through it, and waiting in the narrowing gorge ahead, she could almost feel Calder's cold eyes, ready to finish what the desert had started years ago. The canyon spat them out into a clearing where the morning sun struck harsh against the rock. Maeve hauled Eli down from the saddle, laying him against a boulder, her hands frantic against his bleeding shoulder. His breath rattled, shallow. His eyes, though, stayed sharp, locked on the horizon. Hooves echoed again, but it wasn't the lone rider. It was more. 5 silhouettes cut through the glare, rifles glinting. Maeve's throat closed. They were surrounded. She dragged Eli closer to the rock, revolver clutched tight, though it carried no bullets. From the lead horse, a voice called out, familiar, heavy with betrayal. Sheriff Jonas. His bruises still marked his face from that night in the stable, but he rode tall, badge pinned proudly again to his chest. Maeve's blood turned to ice. "You," she whispered. Jonas dismounted, his boots crunching over gravel. His eyes slid past Maeve and landed on Eli, bleeding and weak. He almost smiled. "Didn't think you'd make it this far, Eli." Eli's lip curled, voice raw. "You sold your soul, Jonas." The sheriff's face hardened. "I paid a debt. Calder saved me once. Pulled me from a grave I dug myself. I swore him loyalty. Now, I will collect what's owed." His gaze flicked to Maeve, sharp as a blade. "And he says she's part of it." Maeve's chest heaved, fury colliding with fear. All her life, men had taken pieces of her, her mother's absence, her father's silence, the saloon's endless nights. And now Jonas, with his badge polished bright, meant to hand her over like a coin. Eli pushed against the rock, trying to rise, but pain crushed him back down. He spat blood, eyes blazing. "Jonas, you don't understand Calder. He'll use you, then bury you." The sheriff didn't flinch. His hand rested on his gun. "Doesn't matter. A man's nothing without his word." Maeve's hand shook on the revolver. Empty or not, she raised it, her voice cracking but steady. "And what's a man worth when his word damns a town?" Jonas froze, studying her. For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then his men moved, rifles lifting. But from the canyon shadows came a sound, a whistle, low and sharp. Calder rode in, his black coat trailing dust, his presence swallowing the space like a storm. The men stiffened. Jonas bowed his head slightly, stepping back. Calder's cold eyes found Maeve, pinning her where she stood. He said nothing at first, only dismounted, boots sinking into the dirt. His gaze slid to Eli, bleeding and broken, then back to her. Finally, he spoke, voice soft as a coffin lid closing. "The debt's not his, girl. It's yours." Maeve's heart slammed against her ribs. She had feared shadows all her life. Now, the darkest one had given her a name. Calder's words echoed through Maeve's skull long after the canyon had gone quiet. "The debt's yours." She didn't know what he meant, not fully, but the way his eyes locked on hers made her blood run cold. By dusk, Calder's men herded them back into Hollow Creek. The town lay hushed, its streets deserted, windows shuttered tight. The saloon doors swung open to emptiness, chairs overturned, lamps cold. It was as if the town itself had given up, burying itself in silence before the storm. Maeve helped Eli inside, lowering him to a corner where shadows pooled. His face was pale, breath shallow, but his eyes never left Calder. The outlaw moved slowly, claiming the room with each step, his men fanning out like carrion crows. Jonas lingered near the bar, his badge gleaming, but Maeve caught the unease in his jaw, the twitch in his hand. Calder finally spoke, voice like gravel dragged across stone. "You wonder why I came back? Why didn't I let the desert finish me years ago?" His gaze cut to Eli. It wasn't hate. Not only. It was her. He nodded toward Maeve, and she froze. Eli's head snapped toward her, pain flashing in his eyes. "Don't you dare." Calder's lip curled, not quite a smile. "Tell her, Eli. Tell her what you did. Tell her why her mother never came back." Maeve's breath caught. The room tilted. For years she had carried that absence like a wound. Her mother's ribbon, her father's whiskey, the endless nights alone. Now Calder's words sliced open what she thought was buried. Eli tried to push up, to stand, but his body betrayed him. Blood spread across his shirt. His voice cracked. "Maeve, I never meant for you to know like this." Her chest tightened, a storm rising inside her. "What did you do?" The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the wind rattling the shutters. Then Eli whispered, each word tasting of ash. "Your mother wasn't lost. She was taken. Calder's kin. I killed them both. Left him to die." Maeve staggered back, the floorboards groaning under her. The shadows around her deepened, pressing close, suffocating. Her life, her fears, all of it traced back to that single night of blood and betrayal. Calder's voice cut through the silence, low and final. "The debt is hers, Eli. She'll pay it, just like her mother did." The men closed in. Maeve's hands trembled, caught between the man who had promised to end her fears and the one who had birthed them. The saloon walls seemed to close in, heavy with ghosts, the silence louder than any gunshot. For the first time, Maeve felt the truth in her bones. Fear was no shadow. Fear had a face, a voice, and it was here in Hollow Creek, waiting to claim her. The silence shattered with the first shot. Glass exploded from a lamp overhead, raining shards across the saloon floor. Maeve dove for cover, the thunder of gunfire swallowing her scream. Calder's men opened fire, bullets tearing through tables and shattering bottles. The air filled with smoke, acrid and choking. Eli struggled to his feet, revolver in hand, his face pale, but his eyes ablaze. He fired into the chaos, each shot a desperate promise to keep Maeve alive. One man dropped, then another, but more shadows swarmed through the doors. Calder stood unmoving in the center, calm as a vulture watching the dying. Maeve's hands shook as she scrambled for Eli's spare revolver. It was heavy, cold, but when she wrapped her fingers around it, something inside her steadied. The fear that had haunted her since childhood shifted, hardened into rage. She rose from the shadows, firing into the smoke. A man fell screaming, his rifle clattering across the floor. The sound snapped Calder's gaze to her. His lips curved in that not smile again. "There's your mother's fire." Maeve's chest heaved, the words cutting deep, but she didn't falter. Not this time. She kept firing, each shot driving the men back, her ears ringing with thunder. Eli stumbled beside her, his blood pooling, his strength nearly gone. Jonas hesitated by the bar, torn between loyalty and survival. Maeve saw it in his eyes, the crack in his oath, the shame gnawing at him. When two men rushed him, rifles raised, Jonas finally drew. His shots dropped them cold, but the recoil carried a price. Calder turned, eyes narrowing on the sheriff who had dared to choose. The next moment was a blur. Calder's gun barked once, and Jonas staggered, blood blooming across his chest. He fell against the bar, sliding down with a gasp. Maeve cried out, rage flaring, but Calder only tilted his head, studying her. "You see it now," he said softly. "This is what loyalty buys. Death, betrayal, silence. You want freedom? Pay what's owed." Maeve's finger trembled on the trigger. She could end him. Right here, right now. But Eli's hand clamped weakly on her arm. His voice rasped through the smoke. "Don't let him take you." The moment hung, suspended in gunfire's echo. Maeve's heart pounded, the revolver heavy in her grip, Calder's gaze like iron chains pulling her down. And then, with a roar that tore from somewhere deeper than fear, she raised her gun. The shot cracked louder than all the rest, smoke and fire filling the air. When it cleared, Calder stood staggered, blood darkening his coat. Yet his eyes still burned, cold and unbroken. Maeve knew then, redemption would not come easy. It would be carved in the crossfire, one bullet at a time, until either she or Calder lay in the dust for good. The saloon lay in ruins, smoke drifting through broken windows, bodies sprawled in silence. Maeve stood trembling, revolver loose in her hand, her dress torn and soaked with blood, not all her own. Calder staggered, but did not fall, his cold eyes fixed on her, sharp as ever, as though bullets themselves could not bury him. Eli collapsed against the wall, sliding down, his breath shallow, his voice rasped, brittle as dry wood. "Maeve, it ends at dawn." She looked at him, then back at Calder, who stepped forward, boots crunching over shattered glass. The outlaw's voice cut through the smoke, low and unyielding. "You're your mother's child." She begged for mercy. "Will you?" Maeve's heart clenched. All her life, she had begged. For safety, for comfort, for fear to leave her. But not now. Not anymore. Her fear had burned away in the firestorm. What remained was steel. The sun broke over the horizon, bleeding gold across the street. Maeve stepped out through the saloon doors, her revolver raised, her shadow stretching long on the dust. Calder followed, calm, unhurried, each step echoing like a death knell. The townsfolk peered from shuttered windows, holding their breath as if the whole town knew this was the end. Eli forced himself outside, clutching his side, refusing to let the moment pass without witness. His voice carried, hoarse but strong. "Maeve, you're not alone. Not anymore." The street fell silent. Dust swirled. Two figures faced each other in the dawn light, one shaped by vengeance, the other by fear. Turned to fury. Calder's hand twitched toward his gun. Maeve's breath slowed, her finger tightening on the trigger. The world seemed to hold still. Then steel flashed. The gunfire cracked like thunder, echoing down the empty street. When the smoke lifted, Calder staggered, eyes wide in disbelief. He clutched his chest, blood spilling across his black coat, before he crumpled into the dust. His eyes found hers one last time, and then the silence claimed him forever. Maeve stood unmoving, her revolver still raised, breath ragged. The town exhaled as though it had been holding its lungs for years. Behind her, Eli collapsed into the dirt, his strength finally spent. She fell to her knees beside him, clutching his hand. His eyes met hers, soft with pain, but full of something deeper, peace. "You ended it," he whispered. "Your fears ended tonight." The sunrise washed them both in gold as Eli's grip loosened, his chest stilling. Maeve pressed her forehead to his, tears soaking the dust between them. When she rose at last, the town still watched, silent, waiting. She holstered the revolver, her body trembling but unbroken. For the first time in her life, Maeve felt the weight lift, the shadows gone, the silence no longer her enemy. She climbed onto Eli's horse, his blood still fresh on the saddle, and rode out into the burning light of the new day. Not running from fear, not bound by it, riding toward whatever waited beyond the horizon, toward life, toward freedom.